This is SaaS Therapy.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of SaaS Therapy, the show where we help you save your most important business relationships, your customers. I'm your host, Todd Kirk, and I'm joined by protein shake connoisseur, Casey Trujillo, who is my ever-present co-host. He's been, I don't know if he's in the middle of bulking up season or leaning down. No, that's not what they say. What do they say, Casey?
Your winter arc.
What's the, is it
well,
you?
Todd,
obviously you got to work out and I'm not healthy. So
what I'm preparing for right now is the High Rocks. So it's this competition that they have. Red Bull, I think, sponsors it, where you basically run 5 miles, but it's like, I think it's 5 miles, 1 mile at a time. And then you're doing like lunges, you're doing burpee, broad jumps. It's just an hour worth of pain.
Wow.
So I'm excited about that. It's coming here in Utah in September. So me and my buddy are signing up for that. You kind of go in as a partnership in that.
Notice that I'm maybe Casey's buddy, but I am not the buddy who's signing up.
You're not that buddy.
You're not my workout buddy.
I don't know anything about running or lifting or eating right. None of those are things I'm good at. So
heavy intakes of protein right now. But Todd, who's our guest for today?
That is the most important part. We have a return guest, actually. Welcome back, Donna. This is Donna Weber, who is a globally recognized customer value and onboarding expert with decades of experience and a track record of providing really, really good consulting to high-growth companies. We've had Donna on before, I think last year, so go back through our episode history if you want to hear more from her. But Donna, we're pumped to have you back. Welcome back to SaaS Therapy.
Thanks for including me. And then, Casey, we got to talk protein. I'm all about protein these days.
Will do. I will get that. But Donna, I mean, you are known as the queen of onboarding, but you have this hot take that just onboarding doesn't matter in 2026. Going forward, it's just not worth anything, right?
Can you believe I'm saying onboarding doesn't matter? I literally wrote the book on customer onboarding, and I'm saying onboarding doesn't matter in 2026. It doesn't matter if you don't deliver value. If you don't deliver value that's meaningful for your customers, if you're not, providing meaningful outcomes to your customers and your business. It doesn't matter if customers are not adopting and you're using your solution. And it doesn't matter if there's no expansion beyond, nothing happens after onboarding.
So Donna, help us understand this. Just paint a little bit of a background. You've been doing this, Todd said decades, but I don't know how you do that when you're 29. Like, did you start when you're 9 years old or something? I don't get that part, but we'll save that for another day. But why? It's the same. It's the importance has been validated. Everyone knows they need to do it. Donna, start us out with just like, why are we continually having this conversation? It seems like we should know how to do this better. Where is the first breakdown, in your opinion, of this?
Yeah, well, first of all, I mean, I have a few ideas. One is that companies are very internally focused. So they're looking at their processes and their products, and they're not really thinking about the customers and what they want and need, especially in the first days, weeks, or months, ideally days or weeks. Secondly, onboarding, when I first talked about onboarding and when I first wrote my book, Onboarding Matters, a lot of companies didn't even have onboarding teams, and now they do, which is really awesome. However, it's become more of a checklist. And I believe onboarding can be your company's greatest growth engine. It all starts at the very beginning. So when they're focused on the product, on their checklists, on their processes, on very internal metrics, on, often very siloed teams, this is what our team does, this is what your team does. They're not really looking at the customer and delivering meaningful value as quickly as possible so that the customers are thriving as a result of using your solution from day one.
Okay, Todd, I gotta ask one follow-up question. So Donna, it seems like there's two paths here. There's what the business wants to achieve, and then there's what the customer needs to achieve. And maybe sometimes one overtakes the other. I know they should be aligned, but it feels like to me a lot that maybe the SaaS organization takes over and says, well, we can only dedicate so many people to do this, and we can only do this, and we can only do this,
This customer's a high touch. That one's a digital touch.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're not.
Is that is that what the problem is? Is that we have these almost two different paths, but we never like get it together?
Well, I believe the priority needs to be the customer, because your customers are the ones who have money. Your product does not have the money, and if you deliver value to your customers, your business is going to thrive.
It's so good. I think one of the things that I'm curious about is, so for me, there's I don't know the right term for this, because obviously I don't know much about health. I also don't know a lot about cars, but I'm going to use an analogy, even though I know a lot about machines. But like, you know how when you're trying to turn on a car, like you can generate a spark, right? And you can get it to make that noise, but it doesn't always turn over and fully get into gear. And so one of the things that I see a lot of times is like, I can deliver some level of first initial value, right? But it doesn't necessarily translate into something where the customer is like really running. And so the question I would have is the gap between, is there a bigger gap between no value and first value, or is the gap bigger between first value and like, I'm actually like, feel like I'm really getting what I want?
I think that's a great question. I'm going to say between no value and first value. And I'm also going to say, because part of that is the great thing is onboarding teams and companies are measuring first value. I have a quote here. I can look it up, but I think it said like 60% of companies are focused on decreasing time to first value in 2026 as a top priority. But for example, I talked with a company that is a top priority. That's a priority their executives are talking about. But when I ask them how they define first value, it's about, well, when we finish onboarding. And just because onboarding is complete does not mean any value has been delivered. Okay, we went through the workshops and your product has gone live, but so what?
Yes,
can
Donna,
you actually do
I want to
anything?
know what is really the value? Because you're speaking truth to my heart right there. Because I do agree that it's like, well, just the fact that like there's so many SaaS vendors who measure, we did time to value because we did the things, we did stuff like, we had this call, we sent you this document. That doesn't mean that the customer has gotten any value.
Correct.
So like, so sorry, how do we change that? Even that on its own, I think is such a good nugget right there.
And if we want to take that even bigger, like a lot of companies, when I talk with them and we really drill in, they don't really know the value that they deliver. They don't really know the outcomes. They know the product features, sales reps know the product features and the functions. But do they really know the outcomes that customers are trying to achieve, the impact that they're looking as a result of the product? And so customers don't care about products or features. They want to get the outcome. So if we go back to that car analogy, yeah, okay, maybe I can get that car to start, but what do I want? Do I want a minivan to carry my 5 kids around in to get to all their after school activities? Am I looking for a sports car to race in? Am I looking for, an electric vehicle to reduce my carbon footprint? So all of the ways that companies are going to engage those customers and get them to some meaningful value is going to be very different depending on those outcomes.
Love that, Donna. Okay, so I'm going to have you judge a situation, and you tell me, again, you're going to say, well, it depends. I need to know more information. Don't worry about that. We're just doing something here, and you can just give your initial reaction. My measurement for first time to value is that in the first 60 days, the admin has set up the system correctly and has given the licenses to the licensed users. Good or bad?
Well, when you say that, where I go, so what? That's where I go. Well, so what? So does that mean anything? Is there any outcome? I would say that's not enough.
Love it.
Of course, you can't deliver the first value without that, but yeah, it's a so what. That's a so what.
Okay. So obviously that that next step then requires to understand, okay, well, what is my software actually delivering, which you mentioned there. But it's like, okay, so maybe we could use an example that everybody knows. Outlook. I installed Outlook. I gave a license to the user and it's like, is the first value when the user sends an email the first time? Is it when they first schedule a calendar appointment? There's obviously there's higher value levels of features that are built into the tool.
Yeah,
right.
I would want to interview the customers to find out, My sister just texted that she lost her whole calendar. Everything's gone. I couldn't even function with that, but so for example, I work with companies and we spend time on this, on how do you define these magic moments or aha moments. Facebook, for example, like, okay, I have a login, I have an account, but if I just go into Facebook on my own, I'm like, well, what's the point? I don't get it. That they find once people have 10 friends, now they have a community and there's interactions, and that's where it starts to really deliver meaningful values, when they have 10 friends. So it depends. So yes, it could be sending an email, it could be receiving an email, it could be calendaring.
Oh, okay. You have an assessment that you offer as a consultation. I don't know if it's paid, not paid, or anything like that, which I think is so valuable, because the magic of change management is the first part of change management is awareness. Like, where am I actually at? And unfortunately, most of us think very highly of ourselves, and we think things are great. And take a look at our experience. It is beautiful. Like, look at how it's all inside the product, and look at this and look at that. And I love the question you've been asking a ton. It's like, so what? And we get hooked on our baby looks beautiful, but okay, is the baby functioning, right? So Donna, tell us more about this assessment, what it's designed to do, what's the purpose of it, and if someone was interested in doing that, talk to them a little bit more about it, because I'm all into awareness. And I tried my first High Rocks, going back to this, I tried my first practice round of it. I only made it through 2 rounds before I thought my heart was going to go through my chest. My assessment was, okay, well, this is a different game than anything I've ever done in my life. But all the exercise and all the things I've done them all the time. I'm strong in those events, but doing it all together, rocked my world. So my assessment is I need to work. So Donna, talk to us about this assessment, what it is, how do they get in contact with you? What is it designed to do?
Oh, well, thanks for asking. Yeah. So the customer onboarding assessment is all about looking at your current state. And if you have any current, I get an overview of the product. I have an intake form to really get an overview of the onboarding process that exists or not. I have a look at existing assets, internal customer facing playbooks, processes, enablement. And then we look at it through 5 different lenses. One is the people, internal people, the processes, the technology, the customer experience, and the scalability. So oftentimes when companies bring me in, customers love them. They're doing a great job, but it's very high touch. It's very white glove. The company's growing, and there's no way they can keep growing their onboarding and implementation teams to keep up with that. So they have a tsunami of new customers coming at them. They're all getting thrown in a backlog now. Customer satisfaction is plummeting. And they think, hey, we know how to do this, but yeah, they're doing it well. But I like to say what got you here doesn't get you to the next level, just like with your workouts, right, Casey? So then we look at, okay, this is where you are. You're doing good. So this is how you get to the next level. Oftentimes it's how to scale. And then really when we look at that is, delivering meaningful value. So I provide some feedback. I give scores of red, yellow, green for each of those 5 areas, and provide a roadmap of now, next, and later, so they can really hit some low-hanging fruit and look at kind of where they're going. And then I can help them with that through an ongoing engagement, or they can do that on their own or with other folks.
Okay. I love that. All right, Donna. So you mentioned something earlier that I really liked, which is all right, you need to understanding what your customers are finding value in is really important. You mentioned customer interviews, which I really like that. I think that's really good advice. Are there other ways or other things that I should be doing? Because my guess is that's not the only way to be able to identify the value that your customer is is getting or hopes to get from your software? Are there other things that we could look at or should be looking at to be thinking, are we measuring value the correct way? Do we have the right definition for our product of what time to first value actually is?
Well, I do think interviewing customers, not just surveying customers, but interviewing them and hearing in their words, it could be really transformational. And I want to say, hey, maybe the best thing to do is interview your top 5 customers. We look at customers who churn, we try to learn from them, but your top 5 customers, it's amazing. Like if you can learn, how are they thriving on your product despite like all the other obstacles and competing priorities, find out what they're doing, find out what they say, and then you can leverage that for best practices for all your customers. Because if they're the ones who are thriving on it, they figured a lot of this out on their own. Then I also like to look at product usage. Now, just because there's usage does not mean value's been delivered. But, if you notice, wow, when they get to this, let's say if there are correlations between, wow, when they use this part of the tool, renewal or expansion rates increase, start to look at those correlations. Because maybe, I've worked with companies where they're busy trying to get customers onboarded to a certain component. But when they get to this one feature, that's where we know, wow, when they use that. For example, a company in Australia, they have a technology for amusement parks. And so, I've done this in Utah. I went mountain biking at Sundance, and you sign the digital waiver.
Mm-hmm.
And so we find when customers use the digital waiver, they're way more sticky and loyal. So we don't want to wait for them to figure out that there's a digital waiver. We don't want to hope that they use it one day. We want to bake that into the very beginning of the journey, because if we know that drives usage and retention and expansion, so we want to start to look at some of those correlations. So not just like, oh yeah, everyone's logged in, but what are they using and how does that correlate to retention and expansion?
Donna, let's set the expectations on this. How many times do SaaS organizations get those key indicators right? So you said the one around, okay, if they've signed the digital, waiver, that they're more likely to be engaged. I've just seen so many people say, this is what we're doing. And then 6 months, they're like, ooh, this isn't actually driving anything we actually wanted it to do, and we need to readjust. So just so people get their expectations, do most people know that? Or
I would know,
the expectation is it's always going to evolve. Like you got to keep on looking at that data.
I think that's the point. It's always going to evolve. Your customers' priorities are evolving. Your product's evolving. So I think it's not just okay, we figured out value, move on. It is always going to evolve. I still think most customer success and onboarding teams are looking internally. So I'd like to have the lens pivoting to the customer.
So when you are brought in, right? So and you're trying to work with a company for the very first time, and obviously everybody's at a different level and they're a different spot. But what would you say is like the most common gotcha? Like the most common things where people are just like, why didn't I think of that, right? Or you want to shake them, like, why didn't you think of this? Like this would be so obvious. Well, I'm curious, what's the common thread where people are tending to just overlook something that they should not be overlooking?
Well, in my orchestrated onboarding masterclass, I have people map out their onboarding framework, right? Their onboarding process. And then everyone in the class gives feedback to everybody else. So they have a person presents, and the feedback they give is like, where's the customer? That's the feedback. It's not just me. Other people say that too. It doesn't have to be me. It's like I've worked with companies where they have this whole thing mapped out, and it's all about the product. It's where's the customer?
Okay. Debate time. I do my own little jingle for it, Donna. It's
that wasn't a jingle. We need to work on your jingles.
I was just yelling. Okay, Donna, here you go. What, in your opinion, is the most crucial part of the handoff? AE to implementation to CS. If you could say you got to nail this one, which one would it be and why?
Yeah,
you can only choose one.
Yeah, the AE to the implementation for sure. The thing is, Casey, is that there's during the buyer journey, and this is of course for more of a higher touch model. You know, if it's product led growth, of course this is not going to be so key. But there's this promise made during the buyer journey, and that sales cycle or buyer journey may last 2 weeks, it might last 2 months, it might last 2 years. But these very experienced sales experts are making promises and they're setting expectations, and they're really good at building trust with customers. And then the deal closes and you get this gap. I'm calling it the value gap. And then you get these implementation teams coming in. Maybe they're like, hey, can you tell me what you bought and why? And right now, then all that trust that was built up starts eroding. Customers get frustrated, and they start learning about the implementation and the kickoff and the integrations and the customizations and the configurations, and all that kind of value discussion gets lost. So they need to like get aligned so that they can deliver on the value that was promised.
Okay, so now here's this. You've triggered something in me, mostly PTSD, having been in this industry for a very long time. And I'm like, all of a sudden having all of these like bad nightmares of past conversations I've had with customers. And I'm wondering, Donna, if like, so one of the things that is so hard, right, is when the customer purchases, they have some outcome they're trying to get to. And then when they're faced with implementation, everything is about what the product can do and how you need to set the product up. And then all of a sudden, a lot of that can get lost in the mix. And so the hard part is like the implementation manager has a job to do, which is like, you need this configuration done, or you need this integration done. So one of the things that's hard is there's a lot of things that we know, like if I work for a SaaS company, which I do, there's a lot of things that we know if a customer is able to implement correctly, they're going to be way more successful in the long run. But they could get value without doing those things. So here's my question and my dilemma that I'm having now that you're bringing this up, which is it better to do a simple deployment with a customer to try to get them to get some value first, and then come back later and now try to convince them that they need to do all this technical, difficult stuff? Or is it better to just really trudge through all the hard technical stuff that you know is going to be really valuable in the long run up front because you're afraid they're never going to do it later? Does that make sense? Because I feel like it's so tough, because like you're like, I know that if I force you to go through all this pain, it's going to be frustrating, it's going to be long, it's going to slow down the time that you get any value, but you're going to be way better in the long run. But if I just let you go now without doing that, you might feel happy in the short term, but you might feel really frustrated later. And I'm not sure which one of those is better, or like maybe there's a third option that I'm just not seeing at all. But like, help me, because I'm now nervous. Like, well, I don't know which one of those is right.
I'm going with door A with that enhanced. To quote my friend Robbie Kelman Baxter, who wrote The Forever Transaction and the Membership Economy, she said, give them a goldfish, not an octopus. So, goldfish, like, have you ever won a goldfish, or kids win a goldfish? It's like,
Yep.
woo, that's very exciting. So yes, give them some value. What happens every time a person or a customer obtains some meaningful value, they get a dopamine hit in their brain. And a dopamine is a feel-good chemical, and it's activated in the reward system of the brain. So the thing is, if they get that some initial wins and they start feeling good, they're going to want to meet with you. Like, hey, Todd, yeah, let's meet, rather than you're bugging me and I have other more important things.
Right.
Feels good. I can demonstrate some wins to my boss. They're not going to be dwelling in buyer's remorse. So we want to drive those quick wins and then create a whole value journey. And I am a big fan of phased deployments over monolithic deployments. So, I know in Utah, you've got some amazing, cliffs of, these big monolithic cliffs. We don't want that. We want, people rock climb and all, but we want these achievable steps. And so, for example, I worked with a company that provides a big data platform. And they were taking 6 to 12 months to go live to check onboarding is complete. And we reduced it to 6 weeks. And so what we did as part of that was to say onboarding is when their first use case or their first data set goes live. Now they can get some meaningful value on that, but then they have the next data set, the next use case, and that might go on for a year, depending on how big the company is. But it's how you frame it. So it's not like, okay, you got some value, see ya, now we're going to try to rope you back in. It's about framing it, setting expectations, showing there's a whole value journey ahead, and it's all going to be building on and only getting better and better.
Oh, that's great. Okay, Donna, we always tell this to our guests is like, we want to just be a conversation. We don't really script things out. We got a theme and we do that. So Donna, if you need time to think about this, which I don't think you will because you're usually like this, right? How would you handle a lot of products now have an AI module to it, right? So, for example, Microsoft, they have their Copilot, or Box has Box AI, or whatever it might be, right? Every product now is coming out with an AI tool to go with it. And not everything, a majority of these AI tools are getting stuck in the customer's IT security. Oh. So from your perspective with onboarding, if you're consistently getting buy-off from the customer, like, hey, yeah, this sounds great. Customer tries to push it internally. IT says, whoop, we got to review everything with security. Like AI isn't officially out yet, blah, 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 blah. How do you do that with onboarding? Like, I mean, you get what I'm trying to say is like,
yeah, because otherwise onboarding is just going to stall out.
Right. Any advice on that is absolutely. Like, how do you do that? And I think this goes to what you just said of like, there could be, multiple ways in doing this onboarding, not just one time. Right. But what's the advice you would have to some of these people that are struggling? Because a lot of people are struggling. There was one state, I won't name the state, but it's a state and local government account. And they currently have in their IT review 22 different AI applications that is stuck in IT, and they're reviewing each one of them before then it can actually go out to the user. Yeah. So thoughts, suggestions, any best practices you might give to our audience that is suffering from that of saying, gosh, we have this great expansion opportunity with AI, but it's just getting stuck with IT?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I want to share there's a statistic that 65 to 75% of IT implementations fail every year. And this is costing, companies billions of dollars. So just because you have a great product, just because it's AI enabled, does not mean it's going to be successful at your customer's company. And that is increasing to 80% with the advent of AI. So a lot of companies think, okay, we get this product, it's got AI, we're going to throw it out there, but that does not mean any value has been delivered. So in my orchestrated onboarding framework, which I cover in my book, Onboarding Matters, the first stage is embark. And before everything was AI, I worked with companies where they would have integrations. So for example, a company in the health tech space, and they had to integrate with health insurance companies. Now you can only imagine the timeframes to do that. So what we did was we had the implementation team start talking about that during the buyer journey. So I'd say 80 to 90% of the, when the sales stage gets to 80, 90%, start talking to the customer about, hey, these are the things that need to take place so that you don't just close the deal and then they're sitting in a backlog or sitting in an IT queue for, 3 months, 6 months, and nobody's getting anything. So you start to say like, hey, we need to get a payment gateway in place. That usually takes 3 weeks. You need to start these now. Or you need to get this moving through your, maybe if the IT queue is that long, maybe even at 50 or 60%, hey, the sales rep needs to start talking about that queue and the security needs and like, for example, when I talk to companies, I ask them, what is the vendor onboarding like? It might be nothing. It might be 3 months. I mean, I worked with a company where it took 3 months to go through all their paperwork and tests and screenings to just even start working with them. So I asked that question. I think that would be a valuable question for sales teams to ask, and maybe even get implementation and CS teams in to helping customers understand, here's the journey. before we can even start a kickoff, you need to be in this place with your internal approvals. And sure, that may slow down the sales cycle, but it's going to increase success post sale.
Okay, Donna. So there's, I'm loving this mostly because it hurts. It hurts in a good way, right? One of the things that I keep wrestling with, Casey just brought up the example of where the customer's internal process is making it harder for the onboarding to go through. but I would guess, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, based off the previous part of this conversation, that it's rarely the customer who's actually making it more complicated. A lot of times it's the vendor who's making it more complicated.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Is that fair? Is that who's more at fault? Is it the customer and like onerous IT practices, or is it the vendor who has all of these like wonderful, great things that they really want the customer to accomplish, but they're unrealistic and they're trying to do too much rather than just focus on the one thing the customer needs right now?
Well, it needs to be a partnership, and as great as the product is, and maybe the onboarding, the adoption, it's the customer's responsibility to realize that value. So I have a story, we're talking about getting fit. My mother, this is several years ago, bought a treadmill. She did the research. She bought the treadmill. She had it delivered. She had it set up, but no value was delivered. She never got on that thing. In fact, rather than improving her health, it created injuries because it sat in her room. She was hanging clothes on it and she tripped over it on the way to the bathroom. So, that just because you have a great product and it's implemented does not mean any value has been delivered. The customer must realize value. And a big reason that 70 to 80% of implementations are failing is because companies, so you look at the buyer, they're trying to check a box, right? Okay, we need AI, or we need this tool or that tool. And they might check a box. They're not really looking at conflicting priorities. They're not addressing change management. They're not really helping teams incorporate new workflows. They're not setting expectations that, hey, the way we're being measured is as a result of this product. Hey, maybe we don't, whatever work you're doing, it doesn't count unless it shows up in this new solution. I've worked with many companies with sophisticated financial software, but they get a lot of churn because the end users revert to spreadsheets. So what's going on internally that there hasn't been a change journey to help them embrace the new tools, see the value, and bridge that gap from the familiar coveted spreadsheets to this new sophisticated analytical tool.
Donna, because there's so many different people that are involved in the customer journey, I think one of the things that people struggle with investing them or the correct amount of time, strategy, energy in the onboarding experience is, how do I give due credit to that experience? I'm a big believer with you. Like, I believe that if the onboarding experience is really well done, that it's going to have your CSMs have more strategic conversations and they're not answering how-to questions and staying in low-level type of things. I think it could also help lessen around support tickets. I think it does expansion opportunity, all that, right? I'm a big believer in that.
What metrics to show the impact?
Yeah. So what would be realistic metrics that I should be looking at to know that this is doing the things that we're doing? I know we're saying, hey, hit time to value, but how do I know that it was the onboarding experience and not Todd, who's an amazing CSM, and him and the CEO are best friends, and I mean they renewed because of Todd. It wasn't the onboarding experience. It's just Todd was such an incredible CSM. Like, how do you do that in a way? And I know there's going to be some crossover, but any best practices there?
Yeah, well, I like to make a distinction between causation and correlation, and look at lagging indicators and leading indicators. The most important thing is knowing what's important to your company. So if every quarterly meeting, the executives are talking about 3 specific metrics they're really looking to move the dial on this year, then I would want to align onboarding with those and start to show some correlation. Maybe it's about recognizing revenue earlier. Maybe it's about support, reducing support costs. So then I would start to look at how a good onboarding experience correlates. It's really hard to prove causation, and everyone's going to argue. And so you can show correlation and just show the data, you know. So for example, I've worked with companies where, you know, a better onboarding reduces support costs, reduces faster time to value. You can show that you're saving your company money because onboarding takes less time. But let's say if customers are onboarded really well, I would want to look at the correlation to expansion time and amounts. So maybe your customers don't expand usually to 12 to 18 months. But if they get all this amazing value in the first 3 months, maybe that starts earlier. That could be, you know, that renewal and expansion revenue starts compounding. That could be huge amounts of revenue for your company. I really like to talk in revenue, you know, cost savings and increased revenue, because that speaks to executives. Those might be more lagging indicators. Metrics like product usage, we've talked about, support tickets, and then, you know, hitting that first value, and then time to first value. So those are some kind of leading indicators I just shared, and then earlier lagging indicators.
Okay, Donna, you triggered a memory. Recently, I was talking with the CEO of a SaaS company, and one of the things that he told me in our conversation, he's like, you know, Todd, it's weird. It seems like no matter what we do, our renewal rates kind of stay the same. And I mean, obviously I haven't looked into this yet for him, but it was an odd take, because what he was telling me is like, we've invested a lot in CSMs, we've invested less in CSMs, we've changed our onboarding process, we haven't changed our onboarding process, and our renewal rates basically hover in the same area every year, and have every year for, you know, 5 years. Would we like them to be better? Of course I would, but it seems like no matter what I do, it's not getting better. And so it was an odd take, because I was like, I mean, initially my thought was like, well, okay, well, let's look at the data, but it was a little bit of a hard conversation, mostly because he was a little bit not dejected, right? But it was he kind of felt like, well, it doesn't seem to matter. Like whatever I do, it doesn't move the needle, it doesn't change it. And so I'm curious, like, what would you do in that situation? Like, how would you go about saying, well, okay, like, because they've looked at lots of stuff and they don't seem to feel like the things that they are looking at are making a difference. And so then it's a question of like, well, what is the thing that, and for me, it's like, my gut reaction is like, well, maybe you're looking a lot at what your people are doing, and your people are doing the best thing they can. Maybe it's a product deficit, right? Maybe you're actually investigating the wrong thing entirely. But I'm curious, like, what would your take be? Where would you investigate? Like, cause for me, it was like really curious. I haven't had a chance to dig in with him yet and to really try to answer those questions, but I'm like, I don't even know, like, where would you go with that?
That's a really interesting dilemma. So one, I would want to look at the data, because oftentimes companies say, well, this is our retention number. We, 80%, 75%, but what does that mean? So I would want to break that down into when that churn is happening. So if it's happening early, like within the first year, and I learned this from our friend Greg Danes, when is it happening? He's got I think he has an article on the 3 kind of curves around that. But if it's happening early, it means that the new customers are not launching. And maybe the retention staying the same because the existing customers are all sticking around, If it's happening later, then they're not getting any new value or ongoing value. So I would want to really, and the other thing is that by segment. So maybe larger customers stick around, and maybe smaller customers are really volatile. And no matter what you do, it's not about you and your company. It's about, like, small companies are more volatile. So I've worked with companies where, as a result of my onboarding assessment, they stopped selling and working with smaller companies. They'll say, hey, but below 6 people, we're not going to work with that size of firm, because no matter what we do, they churn. We have no control there. So maybe there's an element of this customer segment, which is they have no control over. and they just say, wait, we'll let partners work with them, or we'll let that be purely product led and digital. And then we can influence this other segment. So I would really want to look at that data in a few different ways.
Yeah.
And then definitely interview customers, like interview the top 5 customers. Oftentimes they think, well, let's interview customers who left. But it's fascinating to learn why people stick around. And what are they doing internally? Well, we had this, this motion internally. I mean, one client I worked with, they were actually in Utah, not far from you. But, I call them, I wrote an article and an infographic on customer onboarding heroes and horrors. I've worked with companies where I've come in, literally, I traveled to London. We brought 12 of the top leaders from all around the world. We sat in a room and nothing changed, And then this company I worked with in Utah, they were a hero. They had everyone read my book. They had a whole change management program. I came in and spoke with them. They redesigned job descriptions and team dynamics and org charts. They really, they had training and certification for all their team members. They really took this on and took it seriously and made massive change as a result.
Okay. Well, Donna, part 2 has been better. That's why Rocky 3 is my favorite. So we got to have you on one more time after this, because Rocky 3 is the best. So Donna, as always, we leave with a homework assignment that you get to give to our audience. So Donna, what would be the thing that you would ask our audience to go do because of this podcast today?
Yeah, talk to your top 5 customers. So 5 customers, 30 minutes max. Find out what's working for them. What do they love? What do they hate? If they had a magic wand, what's one thing they would change today? What are they doing to thrive on your product? Find that out. That will take you a few hours. It's not a huge lift.
Todd, I'm holding you to that. You better get that done next week. I want to report.
We'll make it happen. Wait, hold on. Is Apollo 3 the one where Apollo and Rocky fight at the end where they punch each other?
No, Rocky 3.
Or is that where he fights Mr. T and Apollo's his coach?
Yeah. Rocky 3 is when he fights Mr. T. There's Hulk Hogan in it, and then he fights Mr. T, and that's the best one.
Okay. Well, I pity the fool who doesn't listen to Donna Weber and have her come back to be on the episode,
nice.
Be on episode 3rd time. If you haven't checked it out, she's an author. We didn't mention this before. Go check out her book, Onboarding Matters. Donna, any other things people should know? I mean, obviously follow her on LinkedIn. How else can people get a hold of you or find you?
Yeah, check out my website, www.donnaweber.com, and that's DonnaWeber.com. And also I have my new Mastering Customer Onboarding course available. It's a self-paced course, 7 different modules with lessons and assignments and exercises and quizzes and a certification. So check that out to take your onboarding to the next level.
Love it. Donna, thanks so much. And thanks everybody for being with us. As always, new episodes released every week on Wednesdays this year. And we got many more coming. So stay with us on this journey. Casey, thanks as always. Good luck. Don't throw up. And what's your race called? The
High Rocks.
The High Rocks. Good luck.
Thank you, sir.
Everybody come out to Utah whenever it happens and cheer them on. It'll be great. So, thanks, everybody. SaaS Therapy is brought to you by Brainstorm, the SaaS platform for SaaS adoption. Learn more at brainstorminc.com.